Because if we don't understand who he was before, we'll never understand what he did afterwards. If he were just an enlightened man who was born, lived, and died, his sacrifice would be noble, but limited. But if he is the eternal one who invaded time, then the cross is not just martyrdom, it's a cosmic event. We are about to enter dangerous ground for human logic. Let's start digging into ancient texts which show that he didn't just stay in heaven, waiting for the moment to be born in Bethlehem. He made visits, he came down, camouflaged, disguised, interacting with humanity long before he had a human name. History is full of fingerprints that do not belong to ordinary angels. There are accounts of encounters with a being who spoke like God, acted like God, received worship as God, but who appeared in the form of a man or a special angel. These were the dress rehearsals for the grand entrance onto the stage. But before we analyze these ghostly apparitions, we need to confront the huge mistake that dominates popular imagination. An infantilized view that turned the Lion of the tribe of Judah into just a moral teacher in sandals. There is a forgotten glory that needs to be recovered, and an ancient prophecy that, if read carefully, dispels any doubt about its timeless origin. Most of us carry a corrupted file in our memory when it comes to the image of Christ. If I asked you right now to picture Jesus, your mind would instantly project a man in his early 30s, wearing simple robes, dusty sandals, walking through the hills of Galilee. You would see the carpenter, the teacher, the man who grew tired, felt thirst, and wept. That image is real and historical, but it is dangerously incomplete. It represents only a tiny fraction of who he is, a brief episode of 33 years in an existence that never had a beginning. The huge mistake we make is to see the incarnation as the beginning of the life of the Son of God. It's like judging the depth of an iceberg only by the tip that appears above the water. The humanity of Jesus, the one born of Mary, was like a spacesuit, biologically woven so that he could operate in Earth's atmosphere without disintegrating us with his glory. But who put on that suit? Who was the person who entered that flesh? We need to decipher the code of the Logos, and we need to listen to what wisdom has to say about the moment the universe was designed. Now we leave the physical battlefield and enter the architectural plans of creation. Now we need to change the lenses on our microscope. We leave the dust of the desert and the physical struggles to enter the universe's design room. Let's dive into the mind of God. To understand who that baby was before being born, we need to decipher a Greek term that the Apostle John carefully chose to begin his gospel. He didn't start with a genealogy, he started with a concept. In the beginning was the Word. The original word he used is logos, and translating it simply as word diminishes its meaning. Logos is reason, it is logic, it is structured thought, it is the intelligence behind everything that exists. For the philosophers of that time, the Logos was the force that held the universe together, the glue of reality. For the Jews, this connected with the Memra, the word of the Lord, which acted, created, and saved in the Old Testament. By calling Jesus the Logos, John was saying something explosive. That man not only spoke the truth, he was the very rationality of existence. He was the thought of God made audible and visible. Before there was a single star in the sky, there was a perfect idea in the mind of the Father, and that idea was a person. To visualize this, let's open the scrolls of Proverbs chapter 8. There, we have an extraordinary scene where wisdom is personified and begins to narrate its own autobiography. She says, "The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his ways, from then on and before his works." Wisdom says that it was established from eternity, from the beginning, before the start of the earth. Imagine the voice of Christ speaking through this poetic text. He describes the moment when God drew the horizon over the face of the deep. He was there, but not as a passive spectator watching the Father work. The text says that he was beside him as the master builder. The Hebrew word here suggests an architect, a skilled craftsman, someone who executes the design with artistic precision. This means that the engineering of the worship and goes beyond. He gives the same command that God gave to Moses at the burning bush. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. His presence made the ground holy. Only the absolute presence of God can do that. That captain of the heavenly armies was Jesus, inspecting the battlefield before the conquest, leading his people not from a distant throne, but with sword in hand. These appearances, or theophanies, reveal a fascinating personality trait of the Son of God. He is not a distant, passive God who merely observes the unfolding of history. He is active, he likes to come down, he delights in being with the children of men. Each of these visits was a rehearsal. He was getting used to the atmosphere of earth, preparing the way for the day when he would come, not for a quick visit, but to dwell among us. There is also the episode in the fiery furnace in Babylon. 3 young Hebrews are thrown into the fire for refusing to bow to a statue. The king, watching from outside, is astonished. He threw 3 men in, bound, but sees 4 men, unbound, walking around in the midst of the flames. And the description the pagan king gives is chilling. The appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Even a wicked king was able to recognize the supernatural nobility of that figure. The fire did not burn the mysterious 4th man, and his presence protected the other 3. Jesus was there, in the midst of the fire, validating the faithfulness of his servants. He is the God who enters the furnace with us. All these clues converge to an undeniable truth. The manger was not the first contact. God with us was already with us in the shadows of ancient history. He was the rock that followed the people in the desert. He was the pillar of fire that lit up the night. He was the manna that fell from heaven. But despite all these visual appearances, the question of his essential identity still remains. He revealed himself as the angel of the Lord, as the prince of the army, as the wonderful one. But there is an even deeper layer. Before he had form, he was idea, reason, and word. To understand the mind of God, we need to dive into the divine philosophy that John presented to us. We need to, from the cosmos, the mathematics of planetary orbits, to the complexity of the human eye, all of this passed through his hands. He was the Father's daily delight, rejoicing in his presence at all times. Creation was a joint act, a divine partnership, where the Father willed and the Word carried it out. He is the supreme artist who would later enter his own painting, but the clues about his pre-incarnate identity become even more specific when we look at the prophecies of Isaiah. The prophet gave us a list of names, which would serve as barcodes to identify the Messiah. He declared that his name would be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God. In the ancient Hebrew language, Pele Yoetz. The word Pele is not a common adjective like beautiful or nice. It is used in the Bible exclusively to describe divine miracles, things that are beyond human capability, the supernatural. By saying that his name is Wonder, Isaiah was confirming what the angel said to Jacob: his nature is incomprehensible to finite minds. He is the living miracle. And here we need to dismantle a theory that has been circulating for centuries and tries to steal the glory of this name. Some suggest that Jesus, in his pre-existence, was the archangel Michael. This idea tries to solve the mystery by lowering the Creator to the level of a creature. The author of Hebrews dedicated his entire first chapter to destroying this possibility. He asks a devastating rhetorical question. To which of the angels did he ever say, "You are my son, today I have begotten you"? The answer is, to none. The angels are described as ministering spirits, winds and flames of fire, servants sent to work. They are the servants of the heavenly palace. The Son, however, is the owner of the throne. The text says that when the firstborn is brought into the world, all the angels of God must worship him. If Jesus were the archangel Michael, this would be an act of cosmic idolatry, an angel worshiping another angel. But the divine command is clear. The angels bow down. Michael, Gabriel, and all the heavenly myriads bend their knees before the Word. Michael is a warrior prince, but Jesus is the King of Kings. The distance between them is the distance between the potter and the clay. Jesus was not in the category of created beings who needed permission to exist, any legal pretext to execute him. The debate revolves around authority and lineage. They take pride in being descendants of Abraham, the founding patriarch of the nation, who died nearly 2,000 years ago. Jesus, with a calmness that defied their fury, makes a statement that sounds like madness to the crowd's ears. He says that Abraham, the father of faith, rejoiced to see his day, saw it, and was glad. The silence of disbelief must have lasted a second before scornful laughter and outrage erupted. They look at Jesus and do the basic math of human biology. You are not yet 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham? Their logic was flawless for this world. Abraham has been dust and ashes for millennia. You are a carpenter from Nazareth in your 30s. The math doesn't add up. They were looking at the chronological clock. Jesus was looking at the compass of eternity. It was at that moment that he decided the time for metaphors was over. He was no longer going to speak in parables about this matter. He was going to pull back the curtain and show who was really wearing that human skin. Take a deep breath and picture the scene. The noise of the crowd dies down as he raises his voice to give the final answer. He says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." That phrase wasn't just an answer. It was a theological nuclear detonation. If you read it quickly, you miss the impact. He didn't say, "Before Abraham, I existed." That would only mean he was older. He used the absolute and continuous present tense. He changed the grammar to reveal his nature. I am. To us in the 21st century, it might just sound like a strong phrase, but to a first-century Jew, it was like the sound of glass shattering in their soul. Those two words, ego eimi in Greek, were the direct echo of the most sacred and unpronounceable name of God in Hebrew, YHWH. Immediately, the minds of all those scholars of the law were transported to the desert of Midian, centuries earlier, to the episode of the burning bush. Remember the story. Moses sees a bush burning without being consumed and asks for God's name. The voice that comes from the fire answers, "I am who I am." This is the name of self-existence. It means that God does not depend on to exist. He upholds all things by the word of his power. An archangel may fight against a demon, but only the word can create life from nothing and forgive sins. The distinction is absolute and infinite. Trying to turn Jesus into an angel is like trying to say the sun is just a candle. Delving even deeper into the identity of the architect, we see that he bears titles that belong exclusively to Jehovah. Isaiah calls him Mighty God. Not a mighty God, but the mighty God, the same terminology used for the Father. This brings us face to face with the mystery of the Trinity, distinct persons, but one single, indivisible, divine essence. He was the wisdom that designed the depths. He was the word that articulated reality. He was the wonderful one who fascinated the patriarchs. But all this glory, all this wisdom, and all this power were about to be channeled into a single point of confrontation in human history. There was a day in Jerusalem when Jesus decided to stop giving subtle hints and drop the atomic bomb about his identity. He claimed for himself the most sacred name, the forbidden name, the name that made the religious leaders pick up stones to kill him. He didn't just say he was the Messiah. He claimed to be the very voice that spoke from the burning bush. We are approaching the moment of greatest tension in Christ's entire earthly ministry, the moment when the veil of time was publicly torn and he presented himself not as the Son of Mary, but as eternity itself standing before them. The revelation of the I Am is coming, and it changes everything we thought we knew about who he claimed to be. We are now moving toward the epicenter of the earthquake. Up until this moment, Jesus had left clues, hinted at his origin, and demonstrated power over nature, but there was a red line that no prophet, no king, and no angel had ever dared to cross. There was a sacred and forbidden territory, protected by the penalty of death in Jewish law, the appropriation of God's name. We are in Jerusalem, in the temple courtyard. The atmosphere is not one of peace, but of verbal warfare. The tension is palpable. The air is thick with hostility. The religious leaders, doctors of the law, and Pharisees surround Jesus like wolves ready to attack. They are offended, furious, and looking for any from no one to exist. He was not created. He has no beginning. He is being itself. When Jesus used this title in the temple, he was signing the authorship of the Bible. He was saying, "The voice that spoke to Moses in the fire is the voice that is speaking to you now." The shock was absolute. They understood perfectly. Jesus was not saying he was a prophet sent by the I Am. He was saying that he was the I Am. He was claiming to possess the very essence of Jehovah. He was placing himself on the same level of holiness, power, and eternity as the Father. The reaction of the crowd proves that they understood the claim. They didn't ask for explanations. They didn't laugh anymore. The text says they picked up stones to throw at him. Why? Because in the Levitical law, the punishment for blasphemy, and blasphemy here means a man making himself equal to God, was immediate stoning. They picked up stones because in their eyes that man had committed the ultimate crime. He had usurped the throne of the universe. What they didn't know, what their spiritual blindness kept them from seeing, was that there was no usurpation at all. The owner of the throne was visiting his subjects, and the subjects were condemning him to death. Consider the cosmic irony of this scene. The creator of the stones was about to be stoned by the very creatures he had formed from the dust, using the very rocks he sustained at the atomic level. The I Am was there, vulnerable, exposed to human hatred, yet maintaining his identity intact. This statement is the watershed moment of history. It eliminates the possibility of Jesus being just a good moral teacher. A good teacher does not tell people that he is the eternal God. Either he was a lunatic with delusions of grandeur, or he was exactly who he claimed to be. There is no middle ground when someone claims the sacred name. Jesus escaped that stoning, hiding himself and leaving the temple, because his final hour had not yet come, but the secret was revealed. The carpenter's secret identity was divinity itself. The name he had in heaven was not a different name. He shared the name above every name. The angel of the Lord in the Old Testament, wisdom in Proverbs, the word in John chapter 1, and the I Am in the temple are the same person. It is the second person of the Trinity, God the Son. Waters. He says that this voice is powerful, full of majesty, that it breaks the cedars of Lebanon and makes the desert tremble. This voice is not a meteorological thunder. It is the audible manifestation of the pre-incarnate Christ. Nature recognizes the frequency of its creator and reacts with awe. When Jesus calmed the storm on the Sea of Galilee, the disciples were terrified and asked, "Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" The answer was in creation. The sea obeyed because it recognized the voice that created it. The water knew who he was. The wind recognized the tone of the one who first breathed it into existence. Nature has no doubts about his identity, only man does. And here we enter the unfathomable mystery of divine unity. How could he be God and be with God? How can we explain the Trinity without falling into heresy or oversimplification? The ancients used the analogy of light from light. Imagine the sun. You have the star itself, the Father. You have the light that emanates from it, the sun. And you have the warmth you feel, the Spirit. You can't separate the light from the sun. If there is sun, there is light. If there is light, it comes from the sun. They are distinct in function, but inseparable in nature. Jesus is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. To see the Son is to see the Father, because the Son is the only way the Father becomes visible to us. He is the face of God turned toward creation. This understanding changes the way we see miracles. When he turned water into wine, it wasn't magic. It was the Creator manipulating the molecular structure of water, accelerating the aging process of the grape, which he himself created in an instant of time. When he multiplied the loaves, it was the Creator generating matter. He was simply doing on a small scale what he has always done on a cosmic scale. The supernatural manifestation of the Creator is overwhelming. He is infinitely great, immensely powerful, and perfectly holy. The vast and unbridgeable chasm between his divine holiness and our own fallen and fragile state of humanity is truly infinite. And it is precisely this distance that makes the next step in our story so inconceivable. How could this being, who holds galaxies like dust in his hands, manage to compress himself? How did the I Am fit inside a zygote? How did the Word become a baby who couldn't speak? The engineering of the incarnation is the most beyond Earth's atmosphere to the cosmic laboratory where reality was forged. We need to visualize the scene described in the letter to the Colossians with the seriousness of a forensic reconstruction. The text categorically states, everything was created through him and for him. Pay attention to the prepositions. Through him indicates that he is the active agent. The Father is the source of will. The Son is the executing power. It's the distinction between the architect who dreams and the engineer who raises the structure. Imagine the zero moment, the silence that preceded the first light. It was not an uncontrolled explosion that generated order by chance. It was a vocalization. The Bible insists on the metaphor of the word or verb because creation is an act of language. God spoke, but who is the Word of God? It is Christ. Therefore, the sound that echoed through the abyss and made matter exist was the vocal frequency of the Son. Visualize the spiral galaxies being formed, not by slow and blind processes, but by the invisible hand of this I Am. He was there, calling the stars by name, the vastness of Andromeda, the fury of the nebulae, the mathematical precision of planetary orbits. All of it bears his digital signature. That baby, who would need to be carried in Mary's arms, had already carried the weight of the universe on his shoulders, but his power is not limited to the macrocosm. Now bring the lens closer to the microscopic level. Look at the cell, at the double helix of DNA, at the dance of electrons around the nucleus of the atom. The complexity of biological life is not self-generated. There is an awe-inspiring intelligence encoding life. The same being who designed the rings of Saturn designed the iris of your eye. There is a technical detail in Colossians that often goes unnoticed, but is vital for our physical understanding of the universe. The text says, "And in him all things hold together." The Greek word means to hold together, to glue. He did not just create and walk away. He is the spiritual gravitational force that prevents the atoms of the universe from disintegrating. He upholds all things by the word of his power, right now, at this very second. This leads us to reread Psalm 29 with new eyes. The psalmist describes the voice of the Lord over the many waters. He says that this voice is powerful, full of majesty, that it breaks the cedars of Lebanon and makes the desert tremble. This voice is not a meteorological thunder. It is the audible manifestation of the pre-incarnate Christ. Nature recognizes the frequency of its creator and reacts with awe. When Jesus calmed the storm on the Sea of Galilee, the disciples were terrified and asked, "Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" The answer was in creation. The sea obeyed because it recognized the voice that created it. The water knew who he was. The wind recognized the tone of the one who first breathed it into existence. Nature has no doubts about his identity, only man does. And here we enter the unfathomable mystery of divine unity. How could he be God and be with God? How can we explain the Trinity without falling into heresy or oversimplification? The ancients used the analogy of light from light. Imagine the sun. You have the star itself, the Father. You have the light that emanates from it, the Son. And you have the warmth you feel, the Spirit. You can't separate the light from the sun. If there is sun, there is light. If there is light, it comes from the sun. They are distinct in function, but inseparable in nature. Jesus is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. To see the Son is to see the Father, because the Son is the only way the Father becomes visible to us. He is the face of God turned toward creation. This understanding changes the way we see miracles. When he turned water into wine, it wasn't magic. It was the Creator manipulating the molecular structure of water, accelerating the aging process of the grape, which he himself created in an instant of time. When he multiplied the loaves, it was the Creator generating matter. He was simply doing on a small scale what he has always done on a cosmic scale. The supernatural manifestation of the Creator is overwhelming. He is infinitely great, immensely powerful, and perfectly holy. The vast and unbridgeable chasm between his divine holiness and our own fallen and fragile state of humanity is truly infinite. And it is precisely this distance that makes the next step in our story so inconceivable. How could this being, who holds galaxies like dust in his hands, manage to compress himself? How did the I Am fit inside a zygote? How did the Word become a baby who couldn't speak? The engineering of the incarnation is the most